Hey, how's it going? In today's video, we're going to be talking about the KingTone Silicon MINIFUZZ. So the KingTone MINIFUZZ comes in two versions. One is a germanium transistor version and the other is a silicon. We are going to be demoing the germanium one in the future when they get back in stock. But for right now, we're going to demo my actual personal silicon MINIFUZZ. So kind of the differences between the two, the silicon one is still warm but has more of a classic fuzzy tone. Also has more lows and highs. It's just more of a full range sound. It also cleans up really well with a beautiful classy glassy clean tone. Very slightly more crisp than the germanium version. The silicon is not temperature sensitive. It is easier to get the low bias and gated tones than you can with the germanium version. And that's because the silicon transistors are just significantly more stable than the germanium ones. But it's really awesome that we have the bias option here. So that was just straight from their website, and we're gonna kind of do a playing demo beyond just the track that you just heard. But I want to talk about a couple things before we do that and the reasons that I ended up with the silicon one. I actually have not played the germanium one, and it's been out of stock for a while. The silicon one, though, was already the one that I was leaning towards because I tend to like the silicon fuzz faces more than germanium ones. The germanium ones have a sound, and if the temperature's right and it's biased correctly, then it can have that sound that nothing else can get you, which is that much warmer, smooth Eric Johnson type of sound. But what I really like with silicon fuzz faces, which is more of that Jimmy vibe typically, is you can clean it up so unbelievably well. You get crystal cleans better than with the pedal off. You can roll your volume down, especially if you have the bias set higher, and it is just crystal cleans, which is what I did at the beginning of this video, and that is a feature that I just really value, especially with the pedal board that this lives on, which is my smaller board. Each pedal needs to really own, and earn its place on that board because it's a much smaller board. We're talking about weight and obviously size. And so to get something that gives me the fuzz sounds that I want, both the spitty and the smoother fuzz sounds, but also that I can clean up really well, that is an amazing pedal to have all in one package. All right, so here we are with the KingTone MINIFUZZ Silicon, and let's quickly talk about my clean tone. I'm playing my PRS for this demo because I can get single coil and humbucker sounds. We might play around with a couple other guitars as well. I'm going through my Smart Bell through the first prototype of the Little John cabs. That's a 212 loaded with EVM 12Ls, and I'm micing it with a Shure SM57 going straight into the Apollo. And here is my clean tone. Okay, it's on the bridge pickup. So with this MINIFUZZ, we've got a few things here. The first one that I want to start with is the three-way mini toggle. Okay, so we've got a fat full option. Okay, we've got the zonk, which is an amazing feature to have on here, which is based on an older fuzz. It's really kind of nasally. It's a great name for the sound, and I don't know if that's just because that's what I'm hearing and I'm associating that name with the sound, but it does have more of a nose in the mid-range, the zonk fuzz does. And then we've got vintage there. So let's just start on the vintage, and we're going to start with the bias about at noon and the fuzz at noon as well. And you'll notice that the volume is going to need to change depending on what setting. I like that there's a huge big knob for the volume because in a live setting, when you step on like a fuzz box, a lot of times, when you set it at rehearsal, you're trying to get, an average on the volume between your pedals. But when you step on it in context, when the drummer's hitting hard at the end of the night, you might find yourself like, oh, I need to be bumped up. So that's an a great feature to have, the big volume knob. I really like that. It's pretty practical and it looks pretty dope too. So that's clean tone. Here's the neck pickup by itself. Now let's split it and get more of a stratty sound. I like that better. I'm a fan of single coils with fuzz anyways. I think they cut through a little bit better. I feel like you get more of a transient with a single coil rather than a humbucker. Okay, we're gonna leave it in single coil mode. Now let's play around with this bias setting, okay? So if we back it off, we're gonna get more of that spitty sound. We're gonna need to turn the volume up. So you can hear it just is very Velcro-y, it's really spitty. Okay, and let's increase the fuzz amount. So this is almost that John Mayer Crossroads sound, okay? It's totally different fuzz as a Pete Cornish fuzz, but it's got that spitty thing. And even if we go to humbucker, just really stabbing each note. There's not much sustain, it's like choked out. You know, and it's kind of hard to play fast. It's even kind of a hard sound to play anyways, but it's got that groove that when you know, you're in the context with the drummer or something. Kind of sounds like a chicken or something to me. I know it's super weird, but okay, let's take this fuzz down now and we're gonna crank up the bias. It's a pedal that just makes you want to keep playing. That sound is great. That's that warm, fuzzy sound that I was talking about the germanium has. This can kind of get there with that. But the beautiful thing is when you have the bias set hotter and the fuzz up, maybe not all the way, this is where that beautiful roll off can happen. For that really glassy clean tone, just by rolling the volume down on your guitar. And just for reference, here is my clean tone. It's pretty clean, but this rolled off. It's got that glassiness and the kind of scooped sound. All right, so let's move on to the zonk mode. Okay, we're gonna keep everything back at noon. So you can already hear it's got more of that mid-range honky or zonk sound to it. So let's back off the bias. We're going to turn the fuzz up. It's almost maybe a little too low on the bias. And as you turn the bias up, it's going to smooth out. It's also going to increase the volume. Okay, and that's definitely more focused on the mid-range, but it's also got less gain. I think just overall there's a little less gain in the zonk mode, and I like that. That's the mode that I typically leave it in because it cuts through a mix, but I'm not just overloading the low end with saturation, and even I've still got some dynamics, even though it is a fuzz, in the zonk mode. But it doesn't clean up the same way. It's almost like a mid boost is left on for your clean tone. Which is a really cool clean tone in itself, but it's not as crystal clean as the vintage mode. So let's take everything back to noon, and we're gonna go to the fat in full mode. So now that mid-range is gone, it's more similar to the vintage mode. However, it is definitely beefier. There's a little more gain on tap. And it adds like a low-mid punch compared to the vintage mode. So let's take the bias down. It's not quite as spitty as the vintage mode to my ears. It still can do that spitty thing. See, it's dying too much. It's almost like this one sounds more choked out in a less musical way than maybe the vintage mode and even the zonk mode on a lower bias setting. So let's turn the bias up. We'll leave the gain where it's at. Again, there's like a hollowness where it's not totally saturated with gain, which I really enjoy playing. Fuzz always makes me want to just play these single note lines, and then I'm like fumbling because I'm like, oh no, don't play something fast. Especially with a sound like this. This is the fuzz all the way up. The bias is set pretty hot, but it's still like, it's very gainy, don't get me wrong. Very much you have a fuzz pedal on. But it's not overwhelmed with gain. There's still like, you can kind of hear some hollowness in the mids that's really cool. However, I think that this sound would probably get fairly lost in a mix unless it was a, you know, like a trio situation or something like that. Cool sound, but like I said, I think that it would get lost in the mix. The last thing I want to do, let's go back to the zonk setting and let's see how close we can get to, I think, somebody who has some of the best you know, modern fuzz sounds, even though he's not necessarily a modern player, is Philip Sace. He plays, you know, only vintage gear and has like the vintage sound, but he's a current guy who's getting just amazing, overwhelmed with fuzz, and it speaks to really his playing, that it just still sounds right. It sounds clean, it's not overly muddy, and every note that he's playing is really intentional, and it comes through. So I think the zonk mode might get us there, but let's listen to the vintage mode. And I tell you what, let's go ahead and switch to the Strat. All right, so now we have the Strat, and you can hear the radio is coming through with the 60 cycle hum. And there's some bad power that I've got to fix here just on that back wall of the studio. But so you can hear some radio coming through, but we've got the Strat here. Let's see how close we can get to some of those Philips Sace tones. That doesn't sound as close to the Philips Sace thing as I thought it might, but let's go to the vintage mode and see if that does it. We're gonna turn the bias down a little bit and get more of that spitty sound. That's a lot closer, definitely. That's definitely closer to that Philips Sace sound. This I don't think is that pedal, but it can do that thing. It's that Jimmy sound, and you can get it a little spittier and brighter with a Strat like that, or with humbuckers like on the Parried Smith in the Zonk mode. That's where I really like it. It pokes out in the mix, but it's not overly saturated, but it's very much the fuzz sound that I'm looking for. I think fuzz is the hardest one out of all the drive types out there because each one is so uniquely different, and I feel like the changes are more drastic, the way they feel and the way they interact with your pickups. You know, even just changing this guitar and the PRS, it's wildly different results with the same pedal. And then the last thing, let's look at maybe some P90s. I'll bring my Les Paul Jr. out and we'll play quickly the P90s in a couple different modes. So here's the P90, and this is just a stock P90 it's still modern, I think it's late 80s. Les Paul Jr. It does have a TBX tone control in there, so I can cut some bass, but we'll leave it in the neutral position for this. So you can hear even a P90 is just wildly different than the Strat, both being single coil pickups, obviously different outputs, but just a different guitar. It totally changes the feel of that pedal. It almost put it in the zonk setting, which was poking through really nicely with the Parried Smith. It was a little muffled sounding, you know, with this Junior. And so that just goes to show you how many tones are not only in this pedal, but in maybe your fuzz pedal, and try a different guitar through it. And changing things like the bias is something that is fairly common in fuzz pedals. Definitely check your fuzz pedal. If it's a different one than this one, you know, check the back and check with the manufacturer if you can change the bias, because that's going to drastically change the way that your fuzz interacts with your guitar. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's video on the KingTone MINIFUZZ Silicon and all the different tones that you can get out of this one really versatile fuzz pedal. If this is the kind of content that you enjoy, please like and subscribe. This is a new channel, and let me know what kind of content that you would like to see. We've got more demos coming and some companies sending some pedals on the way, but feel free to leave a comment or email me in the link down below and let me know what kind of content you would like to see, or if there are some other sleeper pedals that there's not very many demos out there, I'd be happy you know, to snag one up and we can do a full demo on it. Until next time, I've been Colin. All the different sounds that you can get out of, okay. Friends who are tone geeks and okay, fuzz faces. Okay. If this is the kind of content that you enjoy, all right. Okay. To this new YouTube way. Okay. Okay.